I'd like to welcome everyone to today's session, The Future of People and Change Management. This session is brought to you in partnership with the Jefferson Trust, where inspired ideas meet dedicated donors. I'm Eric Hunter. I'm with the Alumni Association. I would like to say thank you to each of you for taking the time to be here today, and also a special thank you to our participating alumni. We'll begin today's session with our panel discussion, which will run about 30 to 35 minutes. We'll then transition to Q&A to take us to the end of the hour. If you have questions that come up during the discussion, please drop them in the chat feature. And if that you would like them to be directed to a particular panelist, please indicate so with your question. After the Q&A, that will close out the formal portion of today's session, and then we'll go into the informal portion, which will be networking sessions, which is optional for attendees. It will be 3 sessions, 10 minutes each, with the focus there on connecting and networking with fellow alumni that are on this call. So just a reminder before I turn it over to our moderator for today's session, please keep your mics muted and your videos off for the panel discussion and also the Q&A. We'll turn those on as we go into the informal networking sessions. So I'm going to now turn it over to our moderator for today, Leslie Johnson. She's a 94 grad of the college and currently a senior VP and human resources executive with Bank of America based out of Charlotte. Leslie?
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everybody. Welcome. And as Eric mentioned, my name is Leslie Johnson, and I am very excited to be with you this afternoon and to be able to host the conversation about how different leaders are thinking about the future of people and change management. We will get started by having each of our panel members also give a brief introduction of themselves. So why don't we start with you, Kelly?
Great. Good afternoon. Great to be with you guys. I'm looking forward to the discussion and the Q&A. I'm Kelly Scalota. I'm the Chief People Officer for Monumental Sports and Entertainment, which is a sports and entertainment company in Washington, D.C. We own and operate Capital One Arena, as well as the Washington Wizards, the Washington Mystics, the Washington Capitals, Capital City Go-Go, and other esports interests. So we have a very diverse workforce, a very dynamic workforce, and I look forward to talking to you guys about how our experiences over the past year and how we face some of these challenges. I'll kick it over to you, Will.
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. It's great to be here with everybody. My name is Will Pike. I'm a 2016 electrical engineering graduate. I'm also a trustee of the Jefferson Trust, so really appreciate the partnership with the Trust on this event. I currently serve as a region vice president in Texas. I'm actually dialing in from Fort Worth today for our family's infrastructure solutions company. So we work in the power, gas, telecom, and renewable spaces across the country. We've got about 10,000 folks as part of the organization, and just really excited to be here to share some of our experiences over the last year and also kind of as we look forward. I'll turn it over to you, Justin.
Great, thanks, Will. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Justin Dean. I'm a managing director and partner at the Boston Consulting Group, where I lead our Washington, D.C. office. I am a proud alum of the UVA Engineering School class of 2001, where I also serve on the Board of Trustees. Excited to be here today. I'll turn it over to you finally, Courtney.
Thanks so much, Justin, and thanks everyone. I'm Courtney Ellis. I'm coming to you from San Francisco, where I'm the Vice President of Employee Experience for a software company called Anaplan. We have about 2,000 employees located in 18 countries across the globe. And so the past year has been a unique opportunity, learning experience, and challenge. And I'm really excited to be part of this conversation on what the world of work and looks like going forward. So thanks, and back to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Courtney. So I think we can all agree that 2020 was an unprecedented year in many different ways. There were some really big health and societal and political and economic shifts that really had, significant impacts on the workforce. Sticking with you, Courtney, can you share with us how the last year has influenced your priorities and your approach to people management?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Our first priority at the beginning of the pandemic was ensuring that all of our employees were safe, were able to get home and get reunited with loved ones. But after that initial kind of logistical challenge and health and safety challenge, we really shifted our priorities and we started to think about what we needed to do differently to work effectively in this moment. And it came down to two key things. One, we needed to equip our managers to communicate thoughtfully and transparently. And that really started at the top down. So we rethought everything from how often we came together as a company. In the past, we came together quarterly for company meetings. We shifted that at first to bi-weekly conversations and eventually to monthly conversations as an organization. We also rethought resourcing. So the other thing I'll get to is we knew people needed to work in a more flexible and dynamic way. And that meant we needed information to be more accessible on an ongoing basis. So rethinking kind of how we put information out there as a company, how we thought about ongoing access to data and information and communications, and also just communicating really clearly and reiterating multiple times. The second thing that we thought about in terms of management was really creating this notion of leading with empathy. And that became a thread through all of our programs for the last year and talking about how that shows up. So what you start a one-on-one conversation with as a manager, how you think about checking in on employee health, well-being, equipping managers with tools to be as supportive as possible across our workforce. And then, of course, rethinking that notion of flexibility. So when we work, how we support employees with the tools they need to be effective in a distributed and remote way.
That's great. Anyone else?
I would just say that we followed similar patterns, really focusing on communication and transparency and moving to sort of an education component in our communication, right? When we think back to the very beginning of the pandemic, we transitioned in essentially 2 days in our organization from being an all in-office workforce to an all remote workforce. And there was a lot of fear and anxiety and apprehension at that time. And so we spent a lot of time, and you, Courtney, you mentioned you guys started with bi-weekly meetings. We started with twice weekly meetings to all of our staff, just talking about what the CDC is saying, how we were putting measures into place, resources that we could get to our employees. So that was certainly an uptick in communication volume, and also just transparency, talking to employees about ways they could keep themselves safe, places they could find masks, where they could find groceries. So we sort of evolved in the type of organization and the things we were talking about.
I think that increased communications is probably a common theme that a lot of us came across over the course of the last year. It's certainly had an impact on strengthening the culture of the companies that we're all working with. I've certainly seen a big difference in the places where we've seen an uptick in the frequency and the types of communication that we've had with our employees as well. For a lot of years, my experience within different organizations was just that, there were some topics that were almost like a third rail. There were things that were considered a little bit more taboo, that people didn't really talk about as much in the workplace. Things like religion or politics. Of course, if religion or politics is your business, then that's a little different. But I will say that the last year has really changed things in the workplace in a way that to a degree that I hadn't seen before. There were lots of conversations and lots of open dialogue where there hadn't been in the past, related to things like race or health and economic disparities and several other things. And so as more of this dialogue has come to the forefront, have there been some societal or political or other types of issues that have had an effect on the culture within your companies? And if so, how was that? And what is it that you're doing or thinking about differently as a result of it? Justin, let's start with you.
Great, thanks, Leslie. Yeah, no, it's been, 2020 was, a different and challenging year, but it also, like with many challenges, presented a lot of opportunities. I know for us, the combination of, the various kind of racial equity and social justice movements, as well as with COVID and the quarantine, combined for, just an interesting dialogue where I think for our staff, we had more kind of open conversations and a better understanding of inequity, equity and inclusion kind of, and it's just embraced it at a different level. But then also, as a consulting firm, kind of how we even take that into the work that we do with our clients, which has been really interesting and I think really opportunistic. We see, my background's in infrastructure, similar to Will. I do a lot of utility work. And, if we think about infrastructure I think about things from an infrastructure perspective. So 2021 is all about rebuilding. It's about economic recovery for kind of all of the US kind of following the COVID crisis and the quarantine. And like with any infrastructure rebuilding, there's an opportunity to kind of rebuild stronger and better than you were before. And I think part of that has been, how do we start to translate those discussions that we had in 2020 into firm actions as we rebuild with an eye towards equity and inclusion. So everything from, we've worked a lot and been focused quite a bit on the digital divide. And I think as you think about the future of work, you see a constant focus around, more remote working, more remote access, and kind of, working from home. But what if you don't have broadband access? What if you don't have internet access? Are you perpetuating structural inequities that, had existed before? So just focusing on asking some of those questions to ensure that as we're transforming and kind of revolutionizing our ways of work, we're not embedding, I would say, structural issues and inequities that have kind of divided us so far. And we can actually use this as an opportunity to bring those together as well.
That's great. Kelly, how about you?
Similar scenario, we engaged in a lot of, being a Washington-based enterprise, we had the triple whammy of the presidential election, the pandemic, and then a lot of racial, social justice activity and protests in and around the city. And our employees and members of our Mystics team and our Wizards team got very active in the space and participated in marches and protests together. And during the same time, we started to have really transparent, changing conversations, much more organizational wide, sort of beyond sort of the smaller forums that we were traditionally having these conversations. And we engaged in a series of intentional, courageous dialogues. The senior leadership team sat down with our minority employee resource group to talk them specifically about their experiences, whether they were feeling like they were being heard, seen, and valued in our organization. So really getting down to the details of their experience working in our organization, and then taking that feedback. Those were listening sessions and reflecting and sort of calling upon the leadership teams and the leaders throughout the organization to build upon that information to create change. And we brought in different experts. We brought in Dr. Kendi to talk to us about how to be an anti-racist organization. We had an opportunity with Fearless Dialogues to come and have conversations about how we can see the strangers among us. And then that was 2020 for us. And as Justin referenced, this is really now about action, how we take these tools and we put them into place and weave them into our fabric in a less transactional and more transformative way. So that's the business of this year.
Sounds like there's a lot of good work ahead, and those are all great, great things that you all have done over the course of the last year, and kind of a good roadmap for others who are thinking about how it is that they move through these same sorts of things within their organizations as well. Switching gears a little, as you all can see, I am working from home today. I would normally be in my office. As a result of me working at home, you may actually hear my dog snoring. He's pretty loud. I'm going to try to keep myself on mute as much as possible so it's not so disruptive. But as we switch gears a little bit, I'd like to ask a question of each of you, since you're representing a diverse group of businesses. Did the way that most of your employees work actually change in 2020? And if so, what was the impact of that change? Or just generally, what have you done to enhance the employee experience as a result of some of these changes that people have been experiencing? Why don't we start with you, Will?
Sure. Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, it definitely had a very significant impact on our business, and it was kind of in a couple of different ways. Because when you think about what we do, we're definitely a production business. I mean, whether it's out on the more field side of our organization in construction, we're building things, or we're engineering things on the professional services side of our business, we're truly kind of all our employees are making product. So that was definitely a big piece of kind of this puzzle for us, because we had sort of really two different paths that were going on in that our construction business, outside of kind of some additional PPE requirements, some social distancing pieces that we had to work through, and more just kind of from a public relations piece for our clients and their customers, it was a lot business as usual. And Justin kind of hit on it a little bit looking forwards, but I would say from our perspective, while our clients were trying to navigate this, and they're oftentimes kind of the thought leaders, I would say, on sort of how our industry is facing new challenges or political events going on, all those sort of things, we kind of usually take a kind of a back burner position. But while they were kind of navigating those challenges, they outsourced a significantly more amount of work, or increased amount of work, to us to help them as they were kind of working priority to navigate through those challenges. So if anything, our business got busier during COVID. So construction was kind of more or less business as normal, but on the engineering professional services side, we had to really ask ourselves some fundamental questions, because kind of like Kelly, overnight, we had to transition to working from home when we'd worked in a collaborative office environment pretty much the entire history of our business. And when you think about technical skill sets and the challenges around new employees, training, development, mentorship, quality assurance, I mean, it's not easy to take an overnight poof, make that digital. Especially in an industry where, regrettably, there's still a lot of paper. We're working on that, but it's definitely a process there. But those were some of the biggest, I guess, hurdles for us. And also, I know Courtney hit it, and the others did as well. But communication in a sort of hyper production oriented business, sometimes the empathy piece takes a little bit of a back burner. And I think that was something where we really had to refocus, kind of make sure we were being conscious of our employees' well-being as well as their productivity. And kind of, I know hyper communication was key for us, because I mean, you sit kind of down the hall or down the cubicles from people that maybe you talk to once a day, twice a day, but when they're all of a sudden not there, it's a fundamentally different dynamic, especially from a leadership and supervision standpoint. So that was a key initiative for us. And then also just communicating from the top down, kind of like some others had talked about, of what's going on in the world, state of the union, state of the company. and just kind of trying to create a positive message in such a dark time.
Thanks, Will. Courtney, how about you guys?
Yeah, it's so interesting to listen to, Will talk about that and others. I think for us, we're in a bit of a different position as we were already inherently a global organization. And for that, used to working in, some distributed ways. But, our platform, so Anaplan is a planning platform. It is web-based, software-based, and connected inherently. And I mention that because it's really funny. We started to have to live our values and our product, potential in a really different way as a company, because even though what we tout as a business is the ability to collaborate in real time across distributed teams on these big financial problems and plan for the future, so much of our own work was still happening in physical spaces that were, we relied on people being in a room together or whiteboarding together. So, for us, that shift to a fully distributed and remote environment did require us to rethink our tools to get really crisp on even how we better leverage our own technology and other software technology to be in a more collaborative space. And also ask questions about, and I'm sure for many others, these are conversations happening in your workplaces as well. What is the purpose of gathering? What's the purpose of being in an office together? And what work can be done as effectively or more effectively when working remotely? So as we think about and look towards, we're still fully distributed. We have not reopened any of our global offices. We will pilot a reopening in Israel really shortly and use some of those lessons learned. But we don't think going back to work, or going back to an office, I should say, we've been working, is going to look and feel the same as it did before. So we're hearing from our employees, they want more flexibility. They want to spend more time integrating between work and life. I candidly maybe have the dryer going right now during this session, and it's really convenient to be able to sneak in some chores in the middle of the workday. I don't think that's unique to me. So we're hearing from people just the opportunity for better integration, better flexibility, and really being deliberate about time spent together in office for collaborative purposes. The other thing, and I'm curious, Justin, to hear some of your thoughts about this as a client-centric and travel-centric office, we're hearing that our clients don't necessarily need as many in-person meetings either. So it's been this really big shift for many of our road warriors who are used to spending 200 plus days on the road and away from family. Sometimes I think they want to beg us to go back out. But, I think it's also that shift in how business gets done on a more broader and global scale versus just what we're doing as a company.
No, it's interesting, Courtney. It's true. I mean, if before the pandemic, if you would have asked me, do you think, in a services business where most of our kind of staff are traveling, 3 or 4 days a week, do you think you could do this job, without your entire company stepping on a plane? Like, I would have said no way. I was like, but I think what this has actually done is it's transformed, I think, how service businesses will react, are going to be structured in how we work. I think it's rethinking things a lot, but it also brings new challenges, as Will mentioned. I think one of the questions that came up in the chat, it doesn't matter, for my staff in Washington, D.C., I regularly check up in folks, and it doesn't matter if you were married or single, if you were young or old, if you had a family or you didn't. This quarantine impacted you in a different way that made us more aware of mental health and helped us to think differently about what are the different types of benefits that we're going to need to have, whether it's stipends to help with childcare, or better technology and kind of support services to help people that might be alone all day. For a lot of our staff, I think about some of our some of our younger staff that, were expecting to be on the road, and it's like, being in a apartment by themselves all day working was a real challenge. So it really helped us to rethink what are the things that our employees are going to need going forward to help them be successful, not only professionally, but personally.
Just chiming on that point, if I can, I want to sort of, one of the ways that I'm focusing on our employees is remembering the context, which is in the context of loss and grief, right? This year has been such a year of loss for our employees. And so whenever we're communicating what's coming or what's ahead, just remembering the context of this has been an unprecedented year of challenges and loss and change. And that's fundamentally hard. Change is hard, right? We like to return to homeostasis. So just adding that filter on anything that we try to do, or as we try new things, as we try to work from home, and then we think about returning into the office, because great nudge, Courtney, yes, we are all working, right? Returning to the office, remembering all of the complications, right? Caregiving responsibilities, school responsibilities, and just accessibility issues around transportation, and will people feel safe and comfortable on public transportation? And so all of these issues are really, really challenging all of us as people leaders and people managers to think about the impact on our employees on a really personal level.
Thanks, Kelly. And I think that's, it's a great reminder around the very real parts of the employee's life experience that, are some of the things that we really need to be taking into account as we think about the employee experience in more totality as we plan for the future, whether it's the future of how we'll return to offices in a larger way, or, what some of the benefits will be, or any number of the things that you've all touched on. So thanks for that. Some have said that people are a company's greatest asset. So in that spirit, how are you staying competitive in your respective industries when it comes to attracting and recruiting and developing and retaining your talent during this time? But up there.
Hey, Leslie, sorry, it cut out a little bit on my end, but happy to jump in on this one. I think it's a couple of different things there for us. It's really focusing on getting the right people, and then our culture. As far as the culture, it's kind of we call it internally Pike Cares. It's kind of that family environment. We're a multi-generational family company, kind of, despite our size, keeping that connectivity amongst our employees. I think that it's all about kind of making it the place you want to work. But I think it also comes back to kind of getting the right people in the door. And we've got a couple of different focuses there. One that's been a really big one for us, particularly on the construction side of our business, has been really focusing on our veteran and our military hiring. That has been hugely successful for us. When you think about kind of a construction organization, kind of the structure mimics or mirrors the military in a lot of ways, whether it's kind of crews or similar to kind of small task force or battalions, and kind of the kind of hierarchical structure. There's a lot of parallels there. So we've found it's a natural and easy transition for our military employees to make that transition. We find them to be usually hyper professional, very reliable, and has really resulted in a low turnover rate for us, which has been really, really great. And then as we think about sort of our professional services and our more professional management employees, we're doing a lot to identify our high potentials and really trying to build that talent bench for the growth. I think Justin, he highlighted it earlier, that's really facing our industry with all of this infrastructure spending and development that's coming down the pipe. One thing I'm really proud and excited to say is we've got a handful of Darden MBA interns joining us this coming summer. And we've actually had several folks that we've hired over the last few years from Darden, and they've been exceptional additions to our team. So we're proud to continue supporting and attracting more Wahoos, as well as some other colleges that are part of our kind of talent acquisition strategy.
That's great. You can't go wrong with a Darden intern, I'm sure. Kelly, how about you guys?
We in terms of our talent, we're maintaining our focus on retaining and growing, hiring, retaining, and growing our existing talent. We have been focused on bringing in diverse talent and supporting our teams as they join our organization through mentorships, through our employee resource groups. We have remained active in those groups throughout the pandemic and in our remote work. And then I think sort of on a go forward basis, we're really going to be trying to use flexibility as a competitive advantage and a differentiator. And the sports and entertainment space, I would say the culture is replicated across teams. So if you go from one NBA team to the next NBA team, the business practices are pretty consistent. And so the opportunity for us is to take these learnings and these experiments we've had through remote work and continue to replicate them, and then be able to offer them out as a recruiting advantage. So those are the way we're sort of thinking about it. But candidly, you know, we're a business in the business of gathering, right? So this has been it has been a pretty devastating effect on our business, and we spent the first couple of months trying to figure out if we could continue and how we would continue and how our business would survive. So just a byproduct of that is there has been a ton of attrition because our employees have sort of seen this inflection point in the organization, in the industry. But we are tackling ways to address that through building support programs for our employees and adjusting compensation practices to address these right? We're not selling tickets right now. so we're adjusting and trying to be nimble on our compensation practices as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Kelly. Courtney, I'll start with you with this question. Are you all thinking at all differently about your business continuity and business resiliency plans for your workforce any differently as a result of what we've experienced over the course of the last year?
Yeah, so I think it's such a great question, Leslie. So for us, like I said, we're about 2,000 employees, so smaller in terms of context here than some of these other organizations and businesses. And we've been in hyper-growth mode. So we've gone from 1,000 to 2,000 employees in really the last 2 years. So that means that we don't have a lot of redundancy in our organization. And we realized very early on that it's not reasonable to have single points of failure. So really thinking strategically about how to build, redundancy. We have a ton of agility as a hypergrowth company that, kind of part and parcel to how we operate, but it's that flip side of, building a strong bench, doing really thoughtful cross training, and also being deliberate as we think about what we need in terms of talent of the future, moving from just some of these harder skills and moving more towards a capabilities-based framework and thinking a lot more about internal training and how we don't bring in talent, but how we build our next generation of talent internally to help sustain us forward. And I think I've seen a lot, and this isn't directly on point, but I've seen a lot of questions around how this also influences building a more diverse workforce. And for us, one thing we realized over the last few, year is really our industry is not representative of, the greater talent pools in the country. So tech historically has not seen the same level of representation of women and biopic employees and individuals. And we realized that we had an imperative not just to change what we looked like internally, but that we had to play a role in changing the industry and the pipeline So we're working right now with a partner called Correlation One, which is really centered around building that next generation of data science and machine learning talent in underrepresented and underserved communities across the country. And so when I think about how we build a more resilient future, it means changing our pool of talent as much as it means changing what our talent looks like internally. And I think that's become, not just a social imperative, but a business imperative for us, because we know we couldn't hire quickly enough and sustain the level of growth without changing something in our broader ecosystem.
I think that's great. And Justin, I see you nodding your head over there. What about you?
No, what Courtney said resonates a ton. For ourselves, we've tried to, increase and make set different aspirations in terms of how we're increasing, the diversity of our staff. It's actually really it's something I've been that we've been working and studying and written a few papers on. But it's oftentimes it's attributed to a pipeline problem. But in reality, I think a lot of these pools of talent exist. It's just people don't know exactly where to go to look and find kind of more diverse talent. And then, getting diverse talent in the door is only the first step. Oftentimes, it's reevaluating your own culture and understanding how do you set it up to ensure that, a more diverse staff can be wildly successful, which is something we've kind of turned the mirror on ourselves and challenged about. How do we think about everything from career development to mentorship to sponsorship, so that everybody really does have a full opportunity to be as successful as possible, and grow their career kind of at BCG.
I think that's excellent. I'm going to pause here and check in with you, Eric. Do we want to start to bring in some of the Q&A?
I think we could do the final question and then roll into it.
Leslie, I think we lost you for a second.
You're on mute.
And frozen. All right.
There you go.
Sorry about that. So for that final question, I'll just check in with each of you. I'll go right down the line to find out.
You're on mute, Leslie.
Yeah, I think we lost her.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. All right, let's see here. I think we've got this mute off and under control. So I'll check in with each of you to find out whether or not over the course of the last year or so, what's one lesson that you've learned that's really informing how it is that you think about, your strategy and the future for your business right now? What's the one thing and that may help other people think about theirs a little differently too? Why don't we start with you, Will?
Sure. Yeah. There's so many things to pick from, but I guess if I had to settle on one, I would really probably say it's just the future of training. And you can take that in a lot of ways. But one, it's kind of some of the technology investments that you may make. One of the things that we're doing is making investments in virtual reality technology to kind of help mimic field environments, different scenarios when people aren't able to travel and gather and things like that, to kind of give us an edge in the training environment, also give us some more data to help us better inform our trainers and monitor progression and things like that. But I would also say, and I kind of hit on it earlier, our industry is notorious for still doing a lot of things by paper. Kind of digitizing our training, getting the resources in front of especially our frontline leaders. I know a lot of the folks in the chat were talking about emotional intelligence, some of the softer skills, things like that sometimes lose a little bit of focus in a more construction, productivity oriented environment. And that's something that we've been really focused on, and I know is going to be a big focus for us as we move forward, kind of continuing to build out our Pike Leadership Academy, which is kind of how we internally deliver a lot of that kind of training to our folks. And and especially putting more of a focus on it with our professional services employees, because we have kind of a decentralized business model. And a lot of those folks, I mean, they have a lot of hats they wear every day, whether it's producing the work, motivating the employees, doing performance management, all of those kind of things that we want to make sure they've got the right tools in their tool chest to be as successful and effective as they can possibly be.
Thank you. Courtney?
You know, I think so many things that Will hit on resonated, and starting from the end, I think that idea of enablement and manager enablement has really hit home over the last year. We haven't had the same structure opportunity to have the same structured impact that we in gathering that we had in past years and at past times. And the amount that we've relied on our managers to ensure not just business continuity, but again, that we were creating, a safe workspace, that people had the resources they needed to do their job and to be, I think in Justin's terms, wildly successful, and that we were building also an inclusive environment. So I think really just the importance of not just manager training, but also enablement and creating the right resources, sounding board, and community. And if I had to have one takeaway, it would be around the importance of community in the workplace. And I think for us, that's also our biggest challenge, figuring out how to replicate and create community as we are increasingly more distributed and unlikely to be gathering all in one place at the same time for a period of time, if ever again. And if I had a corollary, the other thing I would borrow is just we, before the pandemic, were spending a lot of time thinking about work-life balance and integration and what this means for us in a digital and connected environment. And there's one thing that emerged actually from our team in Japan, which is this notion of work-life harmony. And I think more than anything, as many of us are working within our homes, right, and living at work, so to speak, finding that harmony in some way, shape, or form is going to be something I think people found to some extent, over the last year, and how we bring that forward is going to be a big question.
Thanks, Courtney. Kelly?
Thank you, and thank you for you guys' insights. I've really appreciated hearing from the group as well. The lesson I'd highlight is agility for our teams, our culture, and our business practices. Working in a sports and entertainment organization, our business is cyclical, right? We sell, market, and rebrand our teams every year. We have different types of events, but it's basically cyclical work. And so in the course of the year, going to a fully remote work environment, pausing 2 professional sports teams mid-season, restarting professional sports teams in remote locations, in bubbles, and managing to protect our people, keep them working and fully engaged over the past year, protect our business and position it for the future, has demonstrated a skill set and a new strength in our workforce. And I think it's incumbent upon us to acknowledge and focus on that agility that we've demonstrated, which is a different feature in our organization. Just really great.
Thanks, Kelly. And Justin, we're saving the best for last. So.
No, I love it. I think the aspects of what we said of don't regress. I think there's been a lot of great innovation that's happened due to all the challenges that we've exhibited over the last 12 months. Let's make sure we don't regress into old ways of working that were ineffective, et cetera, and move forward. I love what Will said about leaning into technology. I think, for one of my clients that's a higher education institution, they, literally a month before the pandemic, they were talking about how they wouldn't be able to go online and how like a fully virtual, half virtual session they'd never be able to do it. They were able to stand that up within 10 days. post quarantine. So I think, leaning into technology and innovation and enforcing, driving the change. And then third, I think, what I would love to see kind of all of us do more is think about how we're embedding some of the community and societal change into everything that we do, not just from a people aspect, but think about the work that you do, the strategies that you have, the operations that you exhibit. How can you think about the embetterment of the community and the people around you? And in doing that, not as something off to the side, but embedding it into what you do. I know, again, as an energy person, I've seen the evolution of things like climate and sustainability go from something that's been kind of off on the corner in the compliance world to it's now integral into any CEO's corporate agenda and strategic agenda. I think we can continue to do that with issues around equity and societal change.
I think you're right. So thank you. Eric, any questions that you want to throw out here at the group?
Yeah, so we'll just kind of, the first one we'll talk about is, and this is kind of for everyone, if somebody wants to hit it and we can move to a next one or a couple, please feel free. Emotional intelligence, this past year, it's been one where that's come up. We've talked about the training. So a couple questions around that, structural, systemic, issues, and then we also have, unconscious bias. But the question is, how are y'all's companies really measuring that among its employees?
I'm glad to take that one on. So one of the roles that I lead is, with our external kind of racial equity task force that's been set up, looking across a lot of these dimensions, is looking at this. And the one thing I would say is a lot of these emotional intelligence, whether it's emotional intelligence or DE&I or kind of inclusion or unconscious biases, oftentimes companies don't approach it with the same rigor that they might a growth strategy or a cost reduction program or a safety program, where you're leveraging data, you're measuring things, you're setting targets. So I just encourage you not to be afraid to do that. That you come at it with the same way that you would approach any other business problem. Nobody's as good on these dimensions as they think, or let me say it another way. Nobody is that far behind everybody else on these dimensions as they think. From my perspective, having kind of worked with a lot of companies, everybody struggles with these dimensions, and actually starting a dialogue internally amongst your company, as well as kind of with your peers, with your peer companies, is the only way to change. And you can start to measure things and bring that same level of rigor around these things on what outcomes you want to change. And that's the first step to making strides.
I agree. And the only other thing I'd add is involve the voices of employees at all levels of your company in coming up with that strategy. As you're approaching it, don't make it something that's top down. Make sure that you are bringing in lots of different voices from lots of different parts of your company, because that's a part of creating that more inclusive approach to everything that you do. And I think that you'll benefit greatly from having them help build whatever that strategy ultimately is as well.
That's great. Thank you. This past year is one, obviously the physical health of employees was important, but one of the other things that became aware was also the emotional and mental health of employees. How did employees, take it? Did they find that it was being, intrusiveness to them, being asked of how they are emotionally? How did they take it? And then do you think that's something that y'all will continue to do as organizations, is paying more attention to that part of the employee as well?
I'm happy to jump in here. So we had, been focusing on mental and emotional well-being before the pandemic, but we really ramped that up as we saw just the impact of everything from anxiety to isolation to even burnout, as our jobs kind of can be pervasive right now in a 24/7 way. I see Justin laughing at that. And we've really struggled with how to do this in a culturally appropriate and sensitive way. And we found one, providing better resources to access. So we know that access is a huge barrier to receiving mental health support, to finding support that makes sense in different ways. So not just thinking about a traditional EAP, but in the US, we partner with a company called Lyra, which offers both, counseling as well as coaching. So taking down the barrier to entry, both by providing these services in a dynamic and virtual way, but also in a way that isn't only I am sick, but also just saying I might need some help. The other piece has been empowering across our organization and providing access and tooling to managers, as well as sessions that have felt resonant. So I've seen a lot of chatter in the chat around the unique toll on caregivers, for instance, during the pandemic, on working parents, and those who are living alone as well. And so doing targeted sessions and conversations for each of those subgroups to give practical tips and tricks and help people realize that they aren't necessarily alone. So we have really seen a shift and change in conversation, particularly in the US, around mental health. I think we're on a journey of destigmatization, but I am seeing more normalization of this, at least within our workforce. I think we still have a long way to go, but I think this is a trend that is going to absolutely continue. And we're also seeing just more traction in this conversation globally. So, I hate to say that this is one of the silver linings, but I do think there is some goodness in taking this opportunity to bring forward a conversation on mental health and well-being, and then also on other practices we can do to center. So we rolled out a mindfulness series. We've, embedded some meditation practices in our day-to-day, able to nudge them through. I know Will and Justin, you talked about, technology, putting that in a nudge through Slack of, have you taken a moment to pause today? As cheesy as it sounds, we've heard from our employees is pretty resonant and effective. So, I think it means addressing the big issue as well as addressing some of those kind of smaller daily practices.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of jump in. Those are some great thoughts there, Courtney, and just kind of share just one kind of specific piece related to technology that we did that I think helped kind of from a mental health kind of connectivity piece for our employees during the coronavirus episode there last year, and of still kind of guess what we're dealing with today. But it was really the launch of an internal social media platform. And we saw that really drive a lot of connectivity across our employee base and allow them to kind of share events going on in their personal lives, because we have kind of a community page as part of that. So it was really neat to see folks in an isolated kind of environment being able to share kind of what's going on today at the house, or kind of this is something cool that we're doing this weekend, or things like that. It was a nice kind of positive message that our employees were able to see and connect over, even employees who'd never met each other, which was really a cool thing for us to see. Obviously, it's a much bigger conversation. I mean, there's a lot of things that were negatively affecting folks on the mental health side, but I think it was just one positive nugget to share from our side of something that worked.
Sounds great. Thank you, guys. A few more questions here. Obviously, one of paying attention, as we just talked about, the different areas of an employee, whether it's physical, emotional, mental health. But what are some ways that y'all have still continued, one, being sensitive to people going through a lot of change, but then at the same time, still needing to be strategic and meet goals? What are some things that y'all have found that works that you will then be implementing moving forward?
I'll share just a few things. I think like anybody else, I think after about a month or two, the Zoom happy hour kind of met a slow death. And kind of met its match. And I think, but just looking for really innovative ways to kind of connect virtually, and connect in an authentic way. So things that we've done is, even just having like open quote unquote office hours, for our managers kind of with their teams, where they just have, I think sometimes our schedules things can get hyper scheduled, where it's like everything has to be a Zoom call. There is no kind of drop in, I think, as Will mentioned before. So we've had our managers just kind of open up their Zoom chat and just say, hey, I'm just going to be on camera for the next 2 hours. If you want to pop in, talk. If you want to pop in and just leave your camera on and just kind of see how things go. Like, there's a few kind of innovative ways around that, depending on the culture and the team, that I find helpful, that brings a little bit of back of that like office culture normalcy, that'll work. And I think the other thing that we're struggling with too is, even as we return partially and some people kind of remain virtual, making sure there's, evenness. So, making sure that if some people can meet in person, how do we make sure if somebody has to be online or from video, like, do we all go online, so that there's not a sense that they're missing out on some in the room conversation. So I think there'll be some challenges like that as we transition back. But I think those are some of the few ideas that we've seen.
Eric, I'd also say that one of the ways that I think that we've really been able to keep people focused and keep people, all working toward and able to achieve some of the most important strategic objectives is that people tend to rally around a common purpose. And there have, over the course of the last year, certainly been a lot of those that have come up, and there have been a lot of opportunities for people to sort of meet the moment in some way, whether it's in the financial services industry with, getting PPP loans out there, or the stimulus checks to people and things like that, and all of the things that have to happen behind the scenes in order for something like that to actually come to fruition. Or the many other things that many other industries and companies have done in order to help others be able to get through a very challenging time, whether it's healthcare or any other industry. So I think that has certainly been one of the ways that companies and all kinds of people have been able to keep people sort of productive and achieving and really continuing to get the work done in the ways that we've needed them to.
Kelly, did you have anything to add?
I was just going to chime in on the common purpose with a call to action, right? Sometimes people just get buried in the routine and the work and the tasks, and with the call to action, here's where we need you to focus, here's what we need done, when we need it done by, that can help clarify and generate some activity. And to Justin's point earlier about, we have a lot of Zoom happy hour fatigue. I will just say one of the things I've done successfully is to just have, like, I'm going to have my cup of coffee this morning between this time, and I'm going to sit on Zoom. And if you're not here, that's fine. But if you want to tell me about, what your daughter did yesterday that was ridiculous and made a mess in the kitchen, I'd love to hear it. So just allowing for those casual interactions, which are so rich and rewarding when you're back in the office.
That's great. Well, that brings us to the hour there. We're going to transition out of our formal portion here and go into the informal networking sessions. But first, again, I just want to say thank you to you, Will, Courtney, Kelly, Leslie, and also Justin. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Thank you for sharing insight to not just your industry, but just the work at the company and what you're seeing with your employees and clients as well. And I think if everyone was on, then we would probably all give y'all a big old hand clap there. and say thank you.